Stepping into my department chief's office that brisk Tuesday morning, I expected another grueling lecture about my performance. Instead, my hand froze completely on the doorknob as my eyes landed on the elderly gentleman sitting across from her. Gone was the faded flannel shirt and worn khakis he had worn 3 weeks ago in the cafeteria. Today, he wore a tailored charcoal suit, complete with an official hospital system badge clipped to his lapel. He looked at me with the exact same calm, knowing expression he had used over a cold cup of coffee, almost as if he had been patiently waiting for this exact moment. Before my brain could process the surreal scene unfolding before me, my department chief looked up from her paperwork and told me to close the door. My legs barely felt like my own as I forced them to carry me toward the empty chair. To understand how I ended up in that terrifying room, you have to realize that I was 28 months into my grueling internal medicine residency. At that stage of medical training, survival meant mastering only 2 core skills: functioning on a few hours of sleep and constantly masking the overwhelming fear that you were going to mess up. The hospital complex was a massive, intimidating fortress with 42 floors across 3 sprawling towers. It was the kind of environment where you could work on the same floor for 6 straight months and still manage to get lost looking for the service elevator. Deep inside the main building sat the second-floor cafeteria, a chaotic place perpetually smelling of burnt coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and occasionally something vaguely resembling a hot meal. I spent more early mornings there than I cared to admit, usually around 6:15, desperately seeking 20 minutes of normal human existence before morning rounds transformed me back into a stressed medical robot. That particular morning weeks earlier, I was running behind schedule and already carrying a heavy cloud of anxiety. The night before, my intimidating attending physician, Dr. Harrison, had publicly dismantled my confidence after evening rounds. He pulled me aside to inform me that my clinical documentation for a complex patient was embarrassingly thin. He suggested that if I could not produce notes reflecting actual critical thought, I should reconsider my entire future in medicine. He said it in a soft, measured tone that made the harsh criticism burn far worse than if he had simply yelled. I spent that entire night tossing and turning in bed, staring at the ceiling until 2 in the morning while rereading my notes and wondering if I truly lacked what it took to be a real doctor. Consequently, I was in no mood for extra complications when I shuffled into the cafeteria line to grab a coffee and enough food to stop my hands from shaking. As I waited at the register, I noticed an elderly man standing directly ahead of me, attempting to pay for his simple breakfast tray containing oatmeal and a small juice. He was a distinguished man in his early 70s with neatly cropped white hair and a poised posture that commanded natural respect. The cashier, a tired woman with reading glasses dangling from her neck, was patiently explaining that his meal card was showing a remaining balance of only $7. The old man gently patted his pockets, searching through his clothes with a rising look of quiet discomfort as he realized he was short on cash. His ears flushed bright red, exposing the profound embarrassment he was trying so hard to hide in front of a public line. When the cashier offered to set his food aside while he walked back upstairs to find another payment method, he looked down at his warm oatmeal with a brief glance of quiet defeat before pushing the tray forward. Watching this proud elderly man endure public humiliation over $7 triggered a sudden shift inside me. Even though I was exhausted and consumed by my own career anxieties, leaving him in that painful situation felt entirely wrong. Without overthinking it, I stepped forward and handed the cashier a $10 bill to cover his entire breakfast before anyone could object. The old gentleman turned to look at me, searching my face to discern whether my gesture came from genuine kindness or mere pity. I simply smiled, told him it was just oatmeal, and urged him not to worry about it. He gave me a slow, deliberate nod of deep gratitude before I grabbed my tray and headed to my usual corner table. Within minutes, the demands of my exhausting shift took over, and I pushed the brief encounter entirely out of my mind, unaware of how heavily that small moment would impact my future. The weeks following that morning turned into a relentless mental and emotional marathon. My supervisor, Dr. Harrison, continued to run our morning clinical rounds like a hostile courtroom cross-examination. He possessed an uncanny ability to pinpoint the exact detail you were least prepared for, exposing your flaws in front of the entire team with surgical precision. I began working late, coming in on my scheduled days off, and keeping a meticulous notebook of every question he asked, desperately trying to prove that I belonged in the medical program. Then came the unexpected morning when my department chief, Dr. Okafor, summoned me to her private office without giving a clear reason. Walking into her office and finding the cafeteria stranger sitting there in an executive suit felt like stepping into an alternate reality. Dr. Okafor introduced him as Dr. Arthur Vance, a legendary medical scholar who had spent decades leading prestigious research institutions. It turned out he had been quietly brought in by the hospital board as an anonymous consultant to evaluate the actual culture and leadership of our residency program. Dr. Vance looked directly at me and explained that for the past month, he had been observing the hospital from the inside, walking the hallways, sitting in on clinical rounds, and watching how staff treated one another. He revealed that he had intentionally left his wallet upstairs that morning in the cafeteria, curious to see how the people around him would react to a stranger in need. He explained that while most people remained completely glued to their phone screens, my instinct to help revealed something vital about my character and empathy under stress. More importantly, Dr. Vance revealed that he had been secretly monitoring Dr. Harrison's harsh supervision methods and had even reviewed the patient notes my supervisor had harshly criticized. He explained that my clinical notes were actually thorough, highly accurate, and well-reasoned. The harsh criticism I had received was not due to poor medical performance, but rather an abusive management style meant to break young doctors through constant fear. Dr. Vance gently assured me that true excellence in medicine comes from careful dedication, not from being terrified of making a single mistake. Hearing those words from a world-renowned medical authority felt as if a crushing weight had been lifted off my chest after months of silent suffering. Within weeks, major structural changes were officially announced across our department, including new supervision guidelines designed to protect residents from toxic leadership and foster genuine mentorship. Dr. Vance was eventually appointed as our new chief medical officer, signaling a brighter era for the entire hospital. I realized that a simple, uncalculated act of human kindness had not only reshaped my own career, but had ultimately transformed the future of our entire medical program.